The UK has a reputation. Expensive. Unaffordable. A place where a pint costs a tenner and renting a flat means choosing between heating and eating. But is it really that bad? Or is it more complicated than the headlines suggest? Today, we're breaking down the actual cost of living in the UK, from rent to groceries, transport to nights out. And we'll compare what life costs in London versus Manchester versus rural Wales. Because spoiler, the UK isn't one country when it comes to your wallet. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Yes, the UK is expensive. But so is most of Western Europe. And compared to places like Switzerland or Norway, Britain can actually look reasonable. The real issue isn't just the prices, it's the squeeze. Wages haven't kept pace with inflation. Energy bills have soared. And housing? That's become the Great British Crisis. But here's what often gets lost in the conversation: the UK is wildly unequal when it comes to cost of living. What you pay in London bears almost no resemblance to what you'd pay in Newcastle or Swansea. So let's break it down, category by category, region by region. Starting with the big one. Housing, the real killer. Housing is where the UK cost of living debate lives or dies. Because this is where the pain is sharpest. In London, the average rent for a one-bedroom flat is around £1,800 to £2,000 a month. That's for something decent but not fancy. If you want to buy, the average house price in London is over £500,000. For a young professional, that's borderline impossible without help. Now let's compare that to Manchester. A one-bedroom flat in the city centre? Around £900 to £1,100 a month. That's roughly half of London. House prices average around £250,000. Still not cheap, but far more achievable. And then there's Wales. In smaller towns or rural areas, you can rent a one-bedroom for £500 to £700 a month. You can buy a house for under £200,000, sometimes under £150,000. So the question isn't, is UK housing expensive? The question is, where in the UK are you trying to live? London dominates the conversation because it's the capital and the media centre. But the majority of Brits don't live in London. And for them, the housing market looks very different. Groceries, the weekly shop. Alright, let's talk food. Because everyone has to eat. The average weekly grocery bill for one person in the UK is about £40 to £60, depending on where you shop and what you buy. That's roughly £160 to £240 a month. If you shop at budget supermarkets like Aldi or Lidl, you can get that down to £30 to £40 a week. If you shop at Waitrose or M&S, it'll creep up to £70 or more. Here's the thing, grocery prices don't vary as much by region as housing does. A loaf of bread costs roughly the same in London as it does in Liverpool. There are slight differences, but they are not dramatic. What does vary is income. In London, salaries are higher on average, which softens the blow. But outside London, wages are lower while grocery prices stay similar. So proportionally, food can feel more expensive if you're earning less. The UK also taxes food differently than some countries. Most basic groceries have zero VAT. So bread, milk, fresh vegetables, no sales tax. But prepared foods, snacks, and restaurant meals do get taxed. It's worth knowing if you're budgeting. Transport, getting around. Transport is where the UK gets tricky. Because it depends entirely on how you live. Let's start with London. The tube is iconic, but it's not cheap. A monthly travel card for zones 1 to 2 costs around £160. If you live farther out, it's more. Compare that to cities like Berlin or Madrid, where public transport is significantly cheaper. But London has one advantage: you don't need a car. Most people walk, cycle, or take the tube. Car ownership in London is actually lower than the rest of the UK. Outside London, public transport gets patchy. Buses exist, but they are less frequent. Trains are expensive, notoriously so. A return ticket from Manchester to London can cost £100 or more unless you book weeks in advance. So most people outside London own cars. And that's where costs add up. Fuel, insurance, road tax, MOT, maintenance, you're easily looking at £200 to £300 a month, sometimes more. Then there's petrol. As of late 2024, it's around £1.50 per litre. That's roughly $7.50 a gallon in US terms. Not the cheapest, but not Scandinavia level either. Bottom line, London is expensive for transport, but you might not need a car. Outside London, transport is cheaper per trip, but you'll probably need to own a vehicle. Daily life, the little things. Now let's talk about the small stuff that adds up. A pint of beer in a London pub costs £6 to £7 on average. In Manchester or Birmingham, it costs £4 to £5. In rural areas or cheaper cities, it's about £3 to £4. A coffee at a chain like Costa or Starbucks costs £3 to £4 anywhere in the UK. Independent cafes can be cheaper or more expensive, depending on the vibe. A meal out at a mid-range restaurant costs £15 to £25 per person in London, and £10 to £18 outside London. Gym membership costs £25 to £50 a month, depending on the gym and location. Utilities for a small flat, electricity, gas, water, internet costs £150 to £250 a month. This has been one of the biggest increases in recent years. Energy prices spiked after 2022, and while they've stabilized, they are still high compared to pre-pandemic levels. Council tax, the local property tax everyone pays, is about £100 to £200 a month, depending on your property band and location. So yes, the little things add up. But again, it varies. A night out in London can cost you £100 easily. The same night in Leeds might be £50. So, is it really that bad? The honest answer is, it depends. If you're trying to live in London on an average salary, yes, it's tough. Housing will eat half your income or more. You'll be budgeting carefully. Saving will be hard. If you're in a smaller city, Manchester, Bristol, Edinburgh, it's more manageable. You'll still feel the squeeze, especially with rent, but it's nowhere near London levels. If you're in a smaller town or rural area, costs drop significantly. You might need a car, but your rent could be a third of what Londoners pay. The UK's cost of living crisis is real. But it's not evenly distributed. And that's something that often gets lost in the conversation. London's struggles dominate the narrative, but they don't reflect the whole country. What makes it feel worse is stagnant wages. UK salaries haven't kept pace with inflation, especially in the last few years. So even if prices aren't wildly out of line with other European countries, people feel poorer. Because, in many cases, they are. So is the cost of living in the UK really that bad? The answer is, it's complicated. Yes, housing is brutal, especially in cities. Yes, energy bills have shot up. Yes, a lot of people are struggling. But the experience varies wildly depending on where you are and what you earn. The UK isn't uniformly expensive. It's a country of extremes, where London feels like a different economic reality, and where a move 200 miles north can cut your rent in half. If you want to understand the UK, you have to understand this divide. Because it shapes everything, from politics to lifestyle to where people choose to live. More on UK life, culture, and the things that don't make the headlines. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.